All right, it is 2:59, almost 3 o'clock, but yeah, we'll go ahead and start. Or I guess if you're in California or the West Coast, it's almost noon. So good morning for the next 30 seconds. Either way, let me share my screen and we will get right into it today. Do Let's see if it works the first time. One never knows. One never knows. Let's see. Hey, it's Christmas Miracle. It worked. Hey, oh my gosh, I get to say it's a Christmas miracle, and it's almost actually Christmas. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. All right. And what else am I missing? Oh, here we go. So, one of these days is going to be an easy way to make all of this happen, and it's just going to help go smoothly. So we're going to start with question 91. It's the end of these questions, but there is math, and I haven't done math in a while. So we're just going to do that last question and some math. You all know how this works. If you've got questions, just throw them in the chat. But let's start with number 91. If properties are not equal and that didn't even get out the question. Okay. If properties are not equal in value in an exchange, that's a lot of vowels. If properties are not equal in value in an exchange, one person will have to pay the other. All right. So if properties are not equal in value in an exchange, one person will have to pay the other A, capital gains, B, loot, C, boot, or D, adjusted basis value. Okay, well, let's see. What do I know here? What do I know? I know that you don't pay one person. It says here, one person pays the other. You don't pay somebody else capital gains. And the adjusted basis is how you find capital gains. So that's different, right? And then you've got loot or boot. Well, I happen to know it's not loot. Great word. We're not pirates, though. We're not looting anything. The answer would be boot. My question is, I was under the assumption that the boot was the extra money that you, so let's say I have property one, and let's say it's worth 1.5 million. And I want to do, remember, this is a 1031 exchange, and I want to get a property that is just 1 million, right? That 0.5 million or that 500,000, that is the boot, and I'm going to have to pay capital gains on that. But I did not think that you paid that to the other person. Let's see what the answer key says. But either way, it doesn't matter. It's probably way too detailed, but let me see. Um, says don't be thrown off by capital gains. Capital gains tax is deferred in a real estate exchange, but one person doesn't pay that tax to the other. So I think their question is weird. I don't think it goes to the other person. This is your boot, the extra money that you're going to pay taxes on, right? 1031s, once you all get licensed, just make sure the first time an investor's like, hey, I'd like to do a 1031, you get somebody who knows what the frick they're doing because, yeah, you could cause somebody a lot of issues. All right, number 92, math it is. I guess I'm mathing it up on this Friday. A property was sold for $260,000, which was 130% of what the owner paid for it. What had the owner paid for the property? What had the owner paid for the property? And give me a second, just letting people in my Zoom room. I forgot to make it so I don't have to do that. You know what? Never mind. So let's see, where are we going to start? Well, we know if I were to just kind of do the math and you're looking at the answer key, you would take the $260,000 and divide it by 130%, which is going to give you $200,000. And that is our correct answer. It is $200,000. The question becomes, do you know why it is 200,000? Like that, why we're doing that? And so I'm going to go through a quick explanation because regardless if you have this, even if you're in California and don't have this math question on your test, you want to understand this because guys, we're helping people with one of the largest financial decisions in their lives. I need us to make sure we understand the math. So think of it this way. When you buy a property, this is your purchase price, right? That's 100% of your investment. Right? That's your investment. That's what you paid. You bought it for $200,000. But then when you sell it, you got some options. You got three options. Either one, you break even. So if you sell it for $200,000 and you bought it for $200,000, you're breaking even. There was no profit, there was no loss, right? Or you could take a loss and let's say the market's bad and you sell it for 190. Well, now you got a $10,000 loss, right? So you didn't sell it for 100% of what you paid for it. You sold it for less than that. Right? Does that kind of make sense? It's a loss. So you sold it for less. In fact, if I were to say 180, let me make my math easier here. It's going to make it a little easier for me to math off the top of my head. Let's say we sold it for 180. Right? That's a $20,000 loss, which $20,000 is 10%. So you did not get 10% of what you paid for it. You bought it for 200, but you only recouped 180. 180 is 90% of what you paid for it. Right? And then your last option is that you make a profit, which means you sold it for the 200,000 plus some extra. In this case, it was 30% extra. So what we're saying, if I take all that, and I'm just going to move down here to get, move over here for some more space. Doop. We know that you sold it for 130%. If you take this 200,000 and you multiply it by 130%, that's going to give you your answer. Does that even make sense? I'm hoping so. I'm hoping so. So, and that would be 260. And that is why I did this in the beginning. That is why I did that. Because what we're saying is, oh, we know the 260, we know the 130, this was our unknown. These questions, I love them, but they're a little weird and hard to explain unless if you don't understand percentages. But maybe I need to work on that. Not me, but you know what I'm saying. All right, let's do the next one. A building generates gross rent of $30,000 and just sold for $360,000. What is the gross rent multiplier? The GRM. The GRM. Well, the gross rent multiplier, if you take the gross rent and you multiply it by the multiplier, which is just going to be a number, you get value. Okay, so we got 30,000, right, times that unknown GRM equals $360,000. So if we're solving for this, we're going to take that $360,000 and we're going to divide it by $30,000, which should be, yeah, I know I should be able to math that in my head, but why try? I got 12. Our unknown number is 12, and that should be the right answer. And it is. Just remember, your gross rent multiplier tells you exactly what it is. It's a gross rent multiplier. A multiplier is a number that you're multiplying something against or with. So if the gross rent multiplier was 5, you take the gross rent and multiply it by 5, right? So yes, hey, Trix, the answer is D. I see you. I see you there. Hola. All right, our next one. A building has a net operating income of $45,000. Buildings like this are appraised using a capitalization rate of 11%. What is the estimated value of the building? Again, just got to think about what we're doing. And we know, you scroll up here, we know that if we're talking about NOI, we've got a, what do you call that? An equation, a formula. We know if we take NOI, we divide it by the cap rate, we will get value. So I say we go ahead and we do that. Take NOI divided by the cap rate, we have value. So our NOI was $45,000. We divided by our cap rate, 11%. And that's going to give us I did not do that right. NOI divided by the cap rate gives us value 45,000 divided by 11%. There we go. I just put 11 and I was like, oh, that's not the right answer. Hey, Caroline, no worries. You're not late. You're just on time for you. So then we get 409. 090 point and so I think that's going to be rounded to just 409,000. Our answer is A, 409,000. Just knowing our things happen. On question 93, what's the difference between the 12% and the 12? Good question. All right, so I'm assuming we're good at 94. So we're good with, 94 being 409. Your gross rent multiplier is not a percent. I mean, I think the easy answer is to say anytime you have a gross rent multiplier, it's not a percent. But let me show you why. Here. Let's say I have the number 40, right? If I multiply 40 times 12% versus if I multiply 40 times 12. Remember, a percent is basically a fancy word for portion. So when you find 12% of 40, you're saying, hey, if this is 40, let's say that represents 40, we're taking off a chunk. We're taking off, that is the percent. It's a portion of. So when you find 12% of 40, you get 4.8. What is going on with this pencil? Let's try that one. So 4.8 is not a percent, it's an amount. It is an amount that you have there. That's not working either. Let's try that one. So the percent means portion. Versus 40 times 12 means you have this 40, this is 40, and this is 40, and this is 40, and this is 40, and we would do this 12 times. So when you add that percent, you had an answer of 12 or you had 12%. That's not what we want to do, because it was, go back to the problem, you're taking $30,000 and multiplying it by something to get a bigger value. Unless our percent is over 100%, if you take a portion of 30,000, it's going to be smaller. What we're basically saying is, hey, you make $30,000 a year, right? So making $30,000 a year, assume you had that building for like 12 years. Yeah, you're probably going to make, we think the value is about 360,000. I think that's the easiest way to kind of explain it, is you're basically saying, hey, well, if 1 year you make $30,000, then, over time it could be worth this. Does that make sense? Hopefully. Hopefully. Okay, good. You got it. Good. Good. Thank you. All right. How many cubic feet are in a warehouse that measures 80 feet by 50 feet by 18 feet high? So first, just as a reminder, when you get to your test, it could look like this: 80 feet by 50 feet by 18 feet. And I'm saying that because, remember, if it's just one apostrophe, then it's feet. But if you had double, then that would be inches. And I always remember this by saying, well, feet is one syllable, so it gets one little thing, and inches is two syllables, so it gets bloop, bloop. Luckily, this problem didn't give it to us that way, but just as a reminder. So I like to draw these problems out. We got this building. I don't know if I can draw a building. Can I? Sure. Great. Pretend like it's just got a flat roof. There's the front door. Okay, that just makes it confusing. That's our building. We know that we're looking for cubic feet. That's not area, is just the flat surface. Volume is how much would it take to fill that box. If we're trying to put stuff in that box, we want to see how much stuff we can put in that box. That would be volume. And that is the base, or probably better to say, length times width times height. Right? So all we need to do is plug that in. It's 80 feet by 50 feet by 18 feet. And that's going to give me, now my guess is it's probably going to be this 72,000, because that's a big number, but maybe I'm just overestimating. But let's see. We got 80 times 50. I mean, that right there is 4,000 times 18. 72,000. Our answer is A. I mean, do not get, oh, yep, Morel, very good. It's A. Do not get over, I mean, just know this, y'all. Don't get scared by oh, they're asking me to find volume. You got this. If area is just length times width, we're just adding the height multiplication to do this problem. Ooh, 96. Seller Sally sells seashells by the seashore. I still couldn't do it right. Seller Sally pays $1,200 in taxes in advance for the year on January 1st. She sells her house to buyer Brian and closes on June 1st. Who owes what to whom? Oh, I love that question. Who owes what to whom? I don't know why. There's just who makes me think of owls. So I know that you all know I like to draw out a timeline. This is going to be 1-1. This is going to be 12/31. And we know that taxes were prepaid. Sally paid for the whole year. If she didn't sell her house, she wouldn't need to worry about this again until next year. But she prepaid for the whole year. But then on June 1st, she sold her house. So Sally owns the house here, but then Brian owns the house during that second part of the year. Well, does that seem fair to you? Does that seem fair that Sally should go ahead and end up losing money for the whole year when she did not own the house for the whole year? She prepaid. So that means Brian needs to pay her some money. So the first thing we can do is, okay, make sure our answer says Sally is receiving money and Brian is paying money. So that would be Sally is being credited money and Brian is being debited money. So seller owes, yay. No, that's not right. I was going to say yay, but no, that's actually backwards. This would be seller owes would be a seller debit. And nope, I'm looking for a seller credit and a buyer debit. And or buyer owes the seller, maybe. Seller owes the buyer, nope, nope. So now, guys, look, we have a 50-50 chance of guessing this right. Now, this thing is $1,200, which half a year, if that's for a year, then half the year would be $600. And she sold it on June 1st. So that means Sally owned it for January, February, March, April, May. She owned it for 5 months. So she should get more than 6 months back worth. I mean, I think you all know that's $100 a month, basically, but she should be getting a bigger portion back, right? So in this case, it's not that the buyer owes 500. This buyer owes 700. I don't even have to do the math. I mean, I could do the math, but that buyer needs to pay more money. Yeah, exactly. It's B. Does that make sense? Like sometimes for these math problems, you can just kind of, especially ones like this, sometimes if they give you easy numbers, you can just kind of common sense them out. I mean, now, if I did it mathematically, I would have said, oh, $1,200 is annually. Let me divide that by 12, and that would give me $100. And then we know they would own for June, July, August, September, October, November, December. That's 7. 7 times 100. Oh, there's my answer. I could do all of that. Or I could just kind of common sense it out. So there you go. B is our answer. Yay. Okay, next one. If the tax rate is $30 per 1,000, what are the taxes on property assessed at $80,000? Okay. Well, first I need to say the property is worth $80,000, but I need to know how many thousands are in there. So that's going to give me 80. If there were $1,000 bills, it would take 80 of those $1,000 bills to get to 80,000. So we got 80. That's the number of 1,000s in the assessed value. If you're paying $30 for that every 1,000, then I'm going to take that 80 and multiply it by 30. So 8 times 3, what is that? 24. So, and then you got these two zeros, so 2,400. Woof, bringing back some old school math. 2,400 is our answer. I do want to remind y'all that a lot of times the math that I give you, like when I've come up with math problems, when I'm like, oh, I made math problems for you all. It's probably, those math problems are probably a lot, I'm gonna say a lot harder, but they're a little bit more difficult. They're the difficult level problems. More than likely on your exam, you're gonna have these easier problems. Somewhat easier problems. Now, if you're in North Carolina, there are a number of two-step problems where you're going to have to manipulate an equation or something like that. But just saying, for everybody else, the easy math, this is probably about where you're going to be. All right, 98. The factor for a 25-year loan at 6% interest is $6.85. What is the monthly payment on a mortgage loan of $175,000? Is it sad that I love these problems? Like, if I could just tour the country and teach people how this worked, I would be a happy little camper. So, what we know is this word factor. The factor is the rate of monthly payment, right? And that means you're going to pay some dollar amount for every $1,000 borrowed until completely paid off. That says paid. You just can't tell. So it's telling us our factor is $6.85. If you borrowed $1,000, you're going to pay $6.85 a month until you pay back that $1,000. If you borrowed $2,000, you're going to pay 12, what is that? 6.85 times 2. You pay $1,370 a month until you paid off that loan. Remember, that's your P&I payment and it never changes. So what are we going to do? Well, you've got a loan of $175,000. I'm going to take that $175,000. I'm going to not multiply it. Hello, Candace. I'm going to divide it by 1,000, right? And that's going to give me 175. That's how many thousands I borrowed. Just like up here, I said, oh, if I borrowed $1,000, it'd be $685 a month. If I borrowed $2,000, it'd be $1,370 a month because I'm paying $6.85 for every 1,000 borrowed. So if I borrowed $175,000 bills, I'm going to pay $6.85 every month for every 1,000. So I'm paying 685 plus 685 plus 685 plus 685 plus 685. Yeah, clearly that's what multiplication is for. So 175 times 685 gives you 190. Wait, I must have not put that number in correctly. 6.85 times 175. There we go. That's a much better number. So that's $1,198.75 every month. That is your P&I payment that never changes, that you would pay for 25 years. Now, even though the problem did not, and that is A, very good, Miss Stacy, I see you. Even though the problem did not ask us to do this, we're going to do it anyway because you know there's a good chance you're going to be asked. How much, when you make that first payment, When you make that first payment of $1198.75, how much of that is going to go towards principal, what you borrowed, and how much of that is going to the bank, and it's just money that's gone. Right? So it's a very common problem. It's what would be the balance after the first monthly payment? So you borrowed $175,000. You make a payment of $1,100, almost $1,200. And now you want to know, well, do I just owe you 173? No, not all of that money goes towards your paying down what you owe. So when they ask you, what is the balance after the first payment? Remember, what you're doing here is saying, hey, you started with a balance of 175,000. You make a PI payment of 1198.75. Part of that is, I am just all backwards today. Part of that is going to be interest. That's what you're giving the bank. And the difference between whatever you give the bank and the total that you paid, that would be your principal. And that principal is going to give you removed from your balance, and now you have a new balance. So how would I do this? Well, I'm going to say, oh, look, I borrowed $175,000 at 6%. So let's just do it down here. 175,000 times 6% will give me annual. It will give me annual interest of $10,500. If you borrowed $175,000 for 1 year, you didn't make any payments, you're going to pay it back in full plus the interest. Then, yeah, you give the bank back after a year $175,000, but you're going to give them additional $10,500 because they gave you the pleasure of borrowing $175,000. You owe them an additional $10,500 of your money. That is for a year. But if you're making a monthly payment, you've only borrowed it for 1 month. I'm not paying you $10,000 because I borrowed it for 1 month. I'll give you a 12th of a year. So I'm dividing it by 12. If it was 10.5 for a year, dividing that by 12 will give me how much that would be a month, which is $875. So that means, yes, I wrote the bank a check for $1198.75, but $875 of that goes to line the pockets of the bank. That's why I don't feel bad for banks having hard problems. Like, y'all make way too much interest off of us. But yes, I wrote a check for $1198.75, but the bank says we'll take ours first. So 875, if we subtract that from the 1198.75, that means of that money you mailed to them, 323.75, that's what you reduced your principal. Yeah, I wrote the bank a check for $1,100, almost $1,200, but they only, credited my account 320 some odd dollars. So our new balance is going to be the 175, subtract the 323.75, which is, oh, that's a million. Subtract the 323.75. So our new balance next month will be 174,676.25. That would be our final answer. Again, the problem, they want their interest first, right, Tricks? Right? They want their interest first, and they're taking it. Bastards. But whichever. But we remember, if you own a house and it's your primary residence, up until the first, I think it's the first million, you get to write that interest off on your taxes. So when you go to do your personal income taxes, April 15th, you get to say, hey, let me add up all this interest I paid over the year. And I get to write that off on my taxes. That's income. They're not going to tax that as part of my income. It's a write-off. So yeah, it sucks, but at least the government gives us a write-off, and that adds up. Okay, number 9. What is the commission if a property sold for $250,000 and the commission rate is 5%? Look at here. Every single one of us better be able to do this problem, because more than likely you are going to be in residential real estate. I need you to know how much you're supposed to get paid. So this one's pretty simple. We're going to take the 250,000, multiply it by 5%. So that's 12.5. That is a total commission. And remember, that's total. Some of this goes to the seller's agent. Some of this would go to the buyer's agent. And remember, they're not hiring you, they're hiring your broker. So if that was a 50-50 split, you would be, that means one side's getting 6,250, the other side's getting 6,250, and you still are not taking home a check for 6,250. You are going to be splitting that with your broker, depending on what your split is. You might get 70, they might get 30. Because you're a new agent, some teams are like, nope, we want 50% of it because we helped you through it. That's what we mean when we say your commission split with your company. But a lot of people look at the math and say, I don't think my agent deserves $12,500 for showing me a house. Dude, I did so much more than that. And trust me when I say I'm not getting $12,000. Unless you are in selling Sunset. Caroline, you did not know that? Wait, you did? No. Yeah. So this is really important. This split is really important to understand, because what's going to happen is, you're in California, so the house probably isn't going to sell for 250. Let's just do this. I got some extra space here because you're in California, and I want to be real about this. California real estate, I'm gonna assume you're not getting out of there for less than 650. And that would be a very, very modest condo. I'm assuming. All right, I don't know what prices are in California, but I know they're high. So let's say you sell this very small $650,000 condo. Or maybe you're kind of outside and maybe it's decent. Yeah. So what happens is, the seller historically has paid all of the commissions. And I say that because there's a lawsuit, antitrust things are changing a bit, but traditionally the seller has paid all of the commission, right? So let's say altogether there's a 5% commission. That means the seller's not getting a check for $650,000. They're going to have to pay out that $5,650 times 5%. That's going to be $32,500 in commission. And total commission. And you're like, great, I'm getting a check for $32,500. I see you tricks. Yeah, very humble at 650. Very, very humble. So that's a total commission. But remember, you had a listing agent, a listing broker, who then had a salesperson. And there was a buyer's broker who then has a salesperson. Now, in a perfect world, they say, hey, we have this 32,500 and we're going to split it in half. So That means this listing broker is going to get 16,250, and this buyer's broker is going to get 16,250. But we're not done, right? You aren't getting that. Your broker is getting that. So let's say you're the buyer's broker and they tell you you're going to get a 70-30 split. You get to keep 70% of that, right? So if I take 16,250 and multiply it by 70%, that means you get a check for $11,375. But let's break that down because you're like, it's an $11,000 check. Woohoo! But first, taxes. You need to put at least 25% of that in a separate bank account because you're going to owe Uncle Sam. So that means you'll have 75% of that left. So times 25% is 2,843.75. So that's taxes. So if we subtract that out, that leaves us with $8,531.25. All right. That's what you would get. But I also want to point out, you've probably been working with this client for at least 3 months. At least 3 months. Why? Because you would have met the client. They had to find the right house. Then once they found the right house, then you had to, get under contract, negotiate it. There's the closing period where you're in escrow, then it closes. So you got about 3 months of work in there. I don't know how many hours that's going to be. That depends on the client. Sometimes they could like the first house they saw. Sometimes they're like, yeah, no, not for me. But let's say you have 3 months in there. If we divide this by 3, you basically got 28,000 or $2,843.75 each month. I don't know about you, but that barely covers rent. So you're going to have to sell more than one house every 3 months to make this work. You got to build it up. So yeah, people look at this 32.5, but the reality of the situation is you're making about $2,800 a month. Now, if you're not in California, you're like, that sounds great. But if you are in California, that's not going to work. Now, take those numbers, split it in half because let's say the average house is, 325. Well, then you're looking at, $1,500 a month or so. It's not a lot of money. So there you go. Hopefully, Caroline, that helped in kind of making sure you understand the breakdown. And I didn't even include if you go to these larger companies like Coldwell Banker, Keller Williams, Century 21, EXP, of that money that you take, like this 11,375, they're going to take their cut because you're a franchise. So I could do franchise fee stuff math one day, but yeah, they get theirs too. They get theirs too. So you got to have lots of leads. You got to make sure you've got somebody in the pipeline and that's closing. If you could get at least a closing a month, that's a great start. And once you get licensed, and you all are my do or dies. You all are here with me. You come do this. If you don't have, when you go to your companies, somebody who sits down with you like a coach and says, okay, Caroline, okay, Tricks, how much do you need to make or how many sales do you need to have in order to cover your bills? You let me know and I will help you figure it out. That is something a coach is supposed to do. And for each and every one of you, I will just do it. We'll just set an appointment and I will do it. So Tricks, Caroline, who else is here? We got Stacy, got Mariel. Yes. Am I a realtor? I am a realtor. I don't sell anymore. I've been licensed for 20 years, but now I just help people. So yeah, I will help you figure out what this looks like because I love coaching too. So Yeah. Mhm. Does the broker show you how they do the commission split when you're looking for a broker? Ah, good question. It depends. A great broker will. A great broker will show you. And I say that because this is a team effort. You make money when they make money when you make money, right? Brokers aren't here doing this out of the kindness of their hearts. They have to have a business. They've got to make money, which seems a little cold-hearted, but at the same time, they should be showing you how to run a business and make money and to, do the things that you need to do. So if you have a broker that doesn't kind of explain this to you, you may want to rethink your broker. That's just my personal opinion. What you may, is it worth to pay to be part of a realtor? Uh, yes. I'm gonna say, you know what? I'm not gonna say yes like that. I think you asked a question that kind of gets me into the weeds, but um historically, traditionally, it was worth it for the one of the biggest reasons was because that's how you got access to your MLS. Now, with these lawsuits going on, you may not have to be a realtor member in order to get access to the MLS. But let me tell you, you get your money's worth. Like it could be, between 400 and $1,000 a year or whatever. However, you get so much. When you become a realtor, you join the National Association, you'll join your state association, and then you'll join your local association. Most states, your association of realtors is going to have a lot of the contracts that you see when we talk about purchase contracts and the addenda for the contracts and buyer agency agreements and seller agency agreements. Sometimes those come from the Realtor Association. And if you're not a realtor, then you're going to have to find a way to get those contracts. Also, they have great education. Being a realtor gives you access to so much education, so many resources. Um, it's one of those things, in some ways, it's kind of like insurance. You pay it and you're real bitter about it until you need it. And then when you need it, it's a lifesaver. That's kind of how I feel about being a realtor. Yes, you want to make sure that you're doing everything within the code of ethics, but the being a realtor kind of gives me a comfort. Like if I have a question, I need research. In fact, after I finish this phone call, I've got to call the NAR, the National Association of Realtors. There's a library of research. I need something researched, and they're going to do that for me. So oh my gosh, you get so many benefits, which I will be honest, I would say 98% of people who are realtors don't take advantage of all of the extra bonus stuff that comes from being a realtor. And they'll tell you, oh, it wasn't really worth it. What am I getting? Well, it's kind of like if you have a library card, you know how much your library card can actually do, but how many people actually take advantage of all the extra pluses for having a library card? So yes, I've just decided being a realtor is like having your library card. It is this really helpful thing when you need it, like really helpful. It's just a lot of people ignore it until they need it. So, yay. We need to invest a lot, if your opinion. You know what, Real, that is true. That is true. You do invest a lot. But let me ask you this. What other business, and I'm not saying this just because, I mean, this, I guess we're turning this kind of into a coaching moment. What other business do you know that you have the potential to make so much money with so little investment that's not an MLM, a multi-level marketing scheme? Like if you decided to open up a bakery, you'd have to have, you know what? A perfect thing is, y'all, I had for a while there, I was selling natural creams. It was just something I was doing. I was making my own butters and skim creams and hair stuff, and I started selling it and I called it Natural Lux, right? But in order to sell this, I had to have the ingredients. I had to pay somebody for a logo. I had to have a website. I had to have labels. I had to pay for like to go to a show and sell my wares. And I mean, you had to have containers, right? You had to have testers. You have to have, the actual making, like taking the time to create the products. They were good. They're really good. All right. But this right here, expensive. And who knows if you're even going to have a great recipe. Real estate, do not get me wrong. I think a lot of people go into real estate thinking they're going to be the next multi-million person, million dollar person. But I mean, think about it. With a couple $1,000 investment, you could get that back on your first deal. I mean, we talked about this right here, that your first closing could be a check for $8,000. Even if you're not in California, it could be a check for $4,000. You literally can make your investment back in your first deal. Literally. Do you know how many deals it would take for me to make this money back? So there's a love and a hate relationship there for me. Um, I know it's most of us don't have the money to, because what if you don't have your first closing for a while? There is an art, there's a skill to becoming a full-time agent and making sure you're going to get what you need every month so that you can survive. However, the opportunities in real estate are amazing, and you want to find a broker who's going to be your partner in making this happen. It's really like that's what you want as a partner. Right. And you do have to be very smart with money, Mira. Yes, you do. Like people come in and they're like, oh, you can pay for leads, but you got to do the math. That's why I'm so big on math. You got to figure out, okay, I might pay for these leads, but how much are you charging me? Sometimes when you get leads, they might say, oh, you got that check for $8,000. Some of that is ours. Okay, well, we got to go. So yeah, it's hard, but I do love it. I love helping people create their own businesses. I really do. And everybody's business is different. All right, we got one more. We'll call it a day for this set of questions. What is the total interest you will pay on an 8% amortized 25-year mortgage? By the way, we're on number 100. Mortgage loan of $200,000 if the monthly payments are $1,400. All right, we got this. What we know is, I want you all to remember PTL stands for P&I times loan amount. You can remember this as praise the Lord, or you can remember pay the loan, because that's what you have to do. You have to pay the loan during the whole life of the loan, right? But I want you to remember PTL, PI times loan amount. So what's the PI payment? $1,400. Now the T for times is, how many times are you going to pay this? Well, it's 25 years, 12 times a year. So if you do 12 times 25, that gives us 300 payments. This is the PI, and this is the total times that you're going to pay it. So if we multiply that, that gives me the total principal and interest that you would pay over 25 years. So 300 times 1,400 is $420,000. Over 25 years, you will have given the bank $420,000. But remember, you only borrowed $200,000 to begin with. This is your total principal. So that means that bank made $220,000 in interest off of you. See. And that's why our 8% interest and 6% interest. I mean, these numbers all change because your interest is going to change your P&I. I mean, there's so many numbers involved, y'all. But that's why you don't have to, but I want you all to understand the mortgage market and how it works because it directly affects our income. Because if the mortgage rates are too high, then people can't buy, or what they're paying for it's not as much. You got less. But if they're too low, then that tells me something's wrong with the economy. I mean, it can really, you don't have to be, in it every day looking at the Wall Street Journal, but you do want to understand what the economy is doing because that's where your business comes from. If people don't buy then and sell, then how are you making money? So, oh, this turned a kind of into a coaching moment, and I didn't mean it to, but I hope that it helped at least somebody out there. I've got to make a phone call to NAR because I'm a realtor and it really is helpful. I I think being a realtor is amazing. You follow a mortgage broker every Friday. See, Caroline, it affects. I mean, your clients, let me tell you, your clients probably don't know what's going on with their money. And so it sometimes helps to have you explain it in a way that makes sense. So there you go. All right, guys, it is Friday. I will see you on a Wednesday. I was going to do a Michigan review this Sunday, but I think it's going to be next Sunday just because my Sunday got a little out of control with family stuff. But yeah. And I need to do some more one-on-one tutoring for the YouTube channel. Keep up with, especially you all who are here with me every week. I need to do some more tutoring and recording, and I feel like since I do that for free and it's one-on-one, that should be you all because you're right here with me. You're my road dogs. So, guys, I will see you next Wednesday. You know how to find me if you need me in between. And like I say, either be good or be bad and don't get caught. One of the two. I don't know. Bye,
Thank you so
everybody.
much.
You are so
Bye.
very welcome, Miss Caroline.